Hi guys, so here we go, review lesson on 18.5, which is where we started graphing inequalities on the coordinate plane. So if you look at the top left of the page, you can see the success criteria. So we're going through these 5 steps every time. Number 1, we need to identify the type of line. If it's vertical, it's just x equals a number. If it's horizontal, it's just y equals a number. If it's a diagonal line, it has both x and y in the equation. So that's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing that we need to do is if it's diagonal, then we need to see, is it in standard form or is it in slope-intercept form? If it's in standard form, we're going to need to use our inverse operations to get it into slope-intercept form. And then number 3, we're going to plot the y-intercept and trace the slope to plot a second point. We need to determine if the line should be dotted or solid. And if you look at the right, solid lines are inequalities that have or equal to. So less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, those are all going to have a solid line. And the way that we like to think about that is if you see the solid line underneath, the line should be solid. If you do not have the line underneath or the or equal to, then you have a dotted line. Okay, number 5, determine where to shade. If it's less than or equal to, you're shading below. If it's greater than or equal to, you are shading above the line. All right, so let's take a look at the first example we have here. So we have y is less than 3. So again, we're going to go through the same 5 steps. Identify the line. Is it vertical, horizontal, or diagonal? So I know that this is a horizontal line because it has y and a number. So this is going to be a horizontal line. Okay. Since it's a horizontal line, I can skip step 2. I can skip step 3. And I'm just going on to talk about how I'm going to draw that line in. So number 4, looking at the inequality, it is less than or equal to. So that means that I need to have a solid line because of the or equal to. Okay, and then step 5, determine whether we should shade above or below. So it is less than or equal to, so we should be shading below because it's less than. Okay. So I'm just going to sketch this line in the best that I can. So we have a horizontal line going through 3. And we know it's solid. And then I am shading below. So solid line is horizontal going through 3, and I am shading the area below. Like I said, in class, we are not Picasso. This is not art class, so just shade it so that we know what we're talking about and be done with it. Okay, so that's example 1. Example 2, we have x is greater than -2. So still going through those same steps. Number 1, determine the type of line. It's x and a number, so that means it's a vertical line. I can skip steps 2 and steps 3 because it's not a diagonal line. And I can go right to step 4. So greater than, no line underneath, so it is just a dotted line, or dashed, however you want to say. And then because it's greater than, we are going to shade above. It's a little funky though with vertical lines, so we're really not going to shade above. We're going to end up shading to the right, and you'll see why when we graph it. So if I'm going to graph this vertical line, it should be dotted and it should be going through -2. So vertical line, dotted through -2. We don't really have above or below when we're talking about a vertical line. So we have to think about where the x values are going to be bigger. since we're talking about greater than, and x values are bigger to the right. Okay, so that's the only little oddball here with the shading would be your vertical lines. And just think to yourself, okay, are the x values bigger to the right of this line, or are they bigger to the left of this line? Okay, number 3. Now we're getting into a different type here. So we have y is greater than or equal to negative 2/3 x plus 5. So number 1, identify the type of line. It has x and y, so it's a diagonal line. Number 2, is the diagonal line in standard form? No, it's already in slope-intercept form, so we can skip this step. So we're going to skip the second step, and we're going right to the third. So we want to plot the y-intercept. Okay, so looking at this equation, remember the y-intercept is sitting in the B spot, so 5 is your y-intercept. And I'm going to go ahead and plot that on the y-axis. And then my slope is negative 2/3. And that's going to tell us our rise or fall over run. So negative 2/3 tells us to fall because it's negative and run. So I'm going to start at my y-intercept and I'm going to fall 2 and go right 1, 2, 3, and then draw that point in. I am not going to make my line yet because I still have to go through steps 4 and 5. So step 4, greater than or equal to. Because of the or equal to, it is a solid line. And I'm going to try to make the best solid line I can. Not incredibly straight, but it's the best I can do. And then we're going to look at step 5. Should I shade above or below? So it's greater than. Greater than means I should shade above. So I'm going to shade above. All right, and we're done with that one. The last one, that's going to be the hardest one, I'm not going to lie, but we'll get through it. Okay, so number 1, 2x minus 3y is less than 12. So I'm going to start, identify the type of line. Is the line vertical, horizontal, or diagonal? It has x and y in it, so it is diagonal. Okay. Number 2. If diagonal and in standard form, rearrange it using inverse operations. So this is standard form. So we are going to rearrange it using inverse operations. So let's do this. Let's do pink. All right, so I'm going to start. I want to get y by itself. So I'm going to move this 2x by subtracting it from both sides. That leaves me with negative 3y is less than negative 2x plus 12. Not done yet. I need y by itself, which means I need to get rid of this negative 3, which is being multiplied. So to get rid of a multiplier, I divide, and I need to make sure I divide everything by negative 3. Okay, on the left, that leaves me with y. On the right, the negative 2 and the negative 3, those negative signs cancel out to give us 2/3 x, and then 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. Now, our inequality, that sign is going to flip to greater than because we are multiplying by a negative number. So we need to flip the inequality sign because we've divided by a negative. Okay, so now we're there. We're in slope-intercept form, so we can move on to the next step. So our y-intercept, remember, is playing the b role. So in this case, it's -4. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that on my y-axis. And then my slope is 2/3. And remember, that tells us our rise and fall overrun. So we are rising because the 2 is positive, and we're running. So I'm going to start at my y-intercept, and I'm going to go up 1, 2, and right 1, 2, 3, and plot a point. Number 4, determine if it's dotted or solid. So because it is greater than, and just to clarify, we want to be looking at this sign. So since it's greater than, it should be a dotted line because there's no equal to. So I'm going to sketch in the dotted line here. And then step 5, shade above or below. Because it is greater than, I'm going to shade above. Okay, and there you have it. That's how you graph inequalities. So that is all you're going to be doing tonight on your homework, is just graphing inequalities. There's no context, it's just straight up graphing. So make sure that you reference this lesson and my teacher notes as you go through your homework. I've given you an example of all 4 different kinds: vertical, horizontal, diagonal already in slope-intercept form, and then diagonal in standard form. So make sure you guys are using your